My sister kicked my 12-year-old daughter out of my parents' house while I was away on a work trip. When I called my mother, she said, "We don't need them here." So I stopped paying their bills, and now they're at risk of ending up on the street. My name is Daniel. I'm 38 years old, and I'm a single father to a 12-year-old girl named Sophia. I work as a supervisor at a logistics company. It's not my dream job, but it pays the bills and lets me give my daughter a decent life. It hasn't been easy since her mother left us 6 years ago, but Sophia and I have learned to get by together. She's my world, and everything I do is for her. But this story doesn't start with me as a hero. It starts with a work trip that turned my life upside down. It was a Monday morning when my boss called me into his office. "Daniel, we need you to go to the northern branch. There's a problem with the shipments, and you're the only one who can fix it," he said. I wasn't thrilled. The north was a 3-hour drive, and it meant leaving Sophia for a few days. Normally, she stayed with me at home, but this time I had no choice. I told my boss I'd think about it, but deep down, I knew I couldn't say no. The extra money from the trip would help, and I trusted my family to look after Sophia while I was gone. I called my mother that afternoon. She lives with my father and my younger sister, Carla, in the house where I grew up. My mother has always been practical, a woman of few words but reliable. My father, on the other hand, is quiet, almost invisible in the family's decisions. And Carla, well, she's 29 and still lives with my parents because, according to her, life is too expensive. We've always had our differences, but I never thought she'd go as far as she did. "Mom, I'm going to be away for a few days for work. Can Sophia stay with you?" I asked over the phone. There was a pause, as if she was weighing whether it suited her. "Sure, Daniel, bring her whenever you want," she finally replied. Her tone was curt, but I didn't think much of it. She's always been like that. I hung up, relieved, thinking everything was settled. That night, as I packed my suitcase, I talked to Sophia. She was sitting on the couch, playing on her tablet, her brown hair falling over her eyes. "You're going to stay with Grandma for a few days, okay?" I said. She looked up and nodded. "Okay, Dad, but don't take too long." I laughed and promised I'd be back soon. Sophia is a quiet kid, the kind who doesn't cause trouble. She's always been easy to get along with, and I trusted there wouldn't be any issues at my parents' house. The next day, I dropped her off at my mother's. It was Tuesday, and my trip would last until Friday. I brought Sophia with her backpack, a couple of changes of clothes, and her tablet so she wouldn't get bored. My mother greeted me at the door with a blank expression. "Be good, Sophia," I said, giving her a hug. She smiled and ran inside. "See you Friday," I told my mother before getting in the car and driving north. The work was a mess from the start. Shipments were delayed, employees were clueless, and I spent the first 2 days running around, checking inventories, and talking to suppliers. I didn't have much time to think about home, but on Wednesday night, I called Sophia to check in. My mother answered. "Everything's fine here," she said, curt as always. I talked to Sophia for a bit. She told me she played in the yard and watched TV. She seemed okay, so I hung up reassured. Thursday morning, everything changed. I was in the middle of a meeting when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Sophia. "Dad, Aunt Carla kicked me out of the house." My heart stopped. I read the message twice to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. What the hell was going on? I tried calling her immediately, but she didn't answer. I called my mother, and after 3 rings, she picked up. "Mom, what's going on?" "Sophia says Carla kicked her out of the house." I said, trying to stay calm. There was a long silence, the kind that makes you imagine the worst. "Look, Daniel, we don't need them here. Sophia's with a neighbor for now. Don't worry," my mother replied. Her voice was cold, like she was talking about the weather. "What do you mean you don't need them?" "She's my daughter, Mom. What happened?" I shouted, but she gave no explanation. "I already told you, there's no room for problems here," she said before hanging up. I stared at my phone, my head spinning. Problems? Sophia wasn't a rebellious kid. She'd never caused trouble for anyone. I tried calling Carla, but her phone was off. I called Sophie again, and this time she answered. Dad, I'm with Mrs. Lopez, the neighbor. Aunt Carla said I was a burden and threw my stuff onto the patio. Grandma didn't say anything, she explained, her voice trembling. I felt a rage I'd never felt before. My own sister had kicked my 12-year-old daughter out onto the street, and my mother allowed it. Stay calm, sweetheart. I'll fix this. Stay with Mrs. Lopez until I get there, okay? I said, trying to sound calm, though I was about to explode inside. She murmured an okay and hung up. I checked the time. It was 10 a.m. Thursday. I was 3 hours from home, but I couldn't leave yet. I had to finish the job, or I risked losing it. I decided to wait until Friday, but my mind was racing. That night, I didn't sleep. I pictured Sophia alone with her backpack on the street, while my sister and mother acted like nothing was wrong. I thought about all the times I'd helped them. For years, I'd paid part of my parents' household bills, water, electricity, even the internet Carla used all day to watch videos on her phone. When my father lost his job 3 years ago, I was the one who put up the money to keep them from losing the house. And now this, kicking out my daughter like she was trash. On Friday, I finished the job in a rush and drove straight home. I went to pick up Sophia from Mrs. Lopez's first, a kind neighbor who'd always been good to us. When I arrived, Sophia ran to hug me. Thanks for looking after her, I said to Mrs. Lopez, who just nodded with a sad smile. Sophia didn't say much in the car, but I could tell she was shaken. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. When we got to my apartment, I made a decision. I called my mother one last time. Mom, why did you do this? I asked, giving her one final chance to explain. I already told you, Daniel, we don't need problems here, she replied, like a recording. Fine, I said, taking a deep breath. If you don't need us, then you don't need my money either. I hung up without waiting for a response. That night, I canceled the automatic payments for my parents' household bills. Electricity, water, internet, everything. If they didn't want my daughter, they wouldn't get my help. I didn't know what would happen next, but in that moment, it felt right. Sophia was safe with me, and that was all that mattered. What I didn't expect was how quickly things would fall apart for them. It had been 4 days since I stopped paying their bills. It was Friday afternoon, and I was at home with Sophia, trying to stay calm after everything that had happened. She was in her room, drawing in her notebook, while I stared out the window, thinking about how my family had betrayed my daughter. Every time I recalled Sophia's text saying Carla had kicked her out, I felt a burning rage. My mother and sister were to blame. My father, on the other hand, had nothing to do with it. He was always a quiet man, trapped under my mother's decisions. And though he didn't stop them, he didn't support them either. The phone rang while I was making dinner. It was my mother. I answered, teeth clenched. What do you want? I said without a greeting. Daniel, the electricity and water have been cut off since yesterday. We have nothing. How do you expect us to live like this? She said, her tone a mix of anger and desperation. It's not my problem, Mom. You threw Sophie out like she was garbage. I'm not paying for you anymore, I replied. She took a deep breath, like she was holding something back. Your father is sick, Daniel. Without water, we can't even cook for him. This is about Carla, not him. Help us, she said. I felt a knot in my stomach thinking about my father, but my anger toward her and Carla was stronger. If you cared so much about Dad, you would have thought of that before letting Carla kick her out. I said and hung up without giving her a chance to respond. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Carla. You're a miserable jerk, Daniel. You left us without electricity or water over a kid who doesn't know how to behave. We'll sue you if you don't pay the bills. I read it twice, incredulous. Sue me? With what money? Carla hadn't worked a day in her life, and my mother lived off my father's pension. The rage surged. I replied, try it. You have nothing on me, and Sophie is not the problem. You are. I blocked her number after that. I wasn't going to let them blackmail me. That night, while Sophia slept, I sat on the couch with beer in hand, thinking about everything I'd done for them. Not only did I pay their household bills, but I was also paying for an old car they used A 2010 sedan I bought on installments 2 years ago so my mother and Carla could get around. My father barely used it because he rarely left the house, but they depended on it for everything. The idea that they were threatening to sue me while I was still paying for that car made my blood boil. I made a decision. If they wanted a war, they'd get one. On Saturday morning, I went to the bank and canceled the car payments. Then I called the company and told them to repossess it from my parents' house. I didn't care if it was in my name. I was paying installments, and without my money, they had no right to it. That afternoon, my mother called again. "Daniel, they took the car. What are you doing?" "This is insane," she shouted. "You started this, Mom. You threatened to sue me, so don't expect anything else from me," I said, almost shaking with anger. "Your father needs to go to the doctor, Daniel. Without the car, we can't take him. This is about him, not us," she replied, her tone desperate. I didn't believe her. She always used my father to manipulate me. Then figured out. "I'm not backing down," I said and hung up. On Sunday, there was a knock at my apartment door. I opened it, and there were my mother and Carla, both looking angry and exhausted. Sophia was in the kitchen drawing, and I signaled for them to keep their voices down. "Daniel, please forgive us," my mother said, switching to a softer tone. "What happened with Sophia was a mistake. Carla shouldn't have kicked her out, and I should have stopped her. But don't do this to us." Carla nodded, her eyes red. "Yeah, Daniel, I messed up. I didn't mean to hurt Sophia. But without electricity, water, or the car, we're lost. Dad's sick, and without your help, we don't know what to do," she said. I looked at them both, and for a second, I almost felt pity. But then I remembered how Carla had left Sophia's things on the patio like garbage, and how my mother didn't lift a finger to stop her. The rage returned. "You think a sorry fixes everything? Sophia's my daughter, and you treated her like she was nothing. Now you're using Dad to make me feel guilty, but I'm not falling for it," I said, raising my voice. My mother took a step closer. "Daniel, if you don't help us, your father will suffer. Do you want that on your conscience?" she asked. Carla added, "We can fix this if you pay the bills again and get the car back. Don't be cruel." Her words pushed me over the edge. "Cruel? You were cruel when you kicked out a 12-year-old girl. Dad's not to blame, and I feel for him, but you're not manipulating me anymore," I said. Then I made a decision that had been brewing in my mind. If I'm doing so wrong by Dad, then I'll bring him to live here with me and Sophia. He doesn't deserve to be in that house with you. But you two who aren't sick, figure out on your own. I don't need you here." They stared at me, wide-eyed, like they couldn't believe it. My mother tried to speak. "Daniel, you can't," she started, but I cut her off. "Get out of my house," I said, opening the door. They hesitated, but eventually left in silence. That night, I called my father. "Dad, I want you to come live with me and Sophia. You don't have to suffer in that house because of them," I said. He sighed on the other end. "Son, I don't want to be a burden to you," he replied. "You're not a burden, Dad. You're the only one who didn't fail me. Come with us," I insisted. After a long silence, he said, "Okay, Daniel, I'll come." I hung up a mix of relief and sadness. I hated my mother and Carla for what they'd done, but knowing my father would be with me gave me some peace. Monday morning, I went to my parents' house. My mother and Carla were there, watching from the window as I helped my father into the car with a small suitcase. They didn't speak to me, and I didn't look at them. My father sat in the passenger seat, his face tired but calm. "Thanks, son," he said quietly as we drove to my apartment. "You don't have to thank me, Dad. This is the right thing," I replied. When we got home, Sophia ran to hug him. "Grandpa, are you going to live with us?" she asked. He smiled weakly. "Yes, little one. We'll be together now." That night, while my father rested in the guest room and Sophia slept, I sat on the couch, my head full of thoughts. I hated my mother and Carla with every fiber of my being, but having my father with me made me feel I'd done something good. They could keep their pride and misery. I had my daughter and my father, and that was enough. For weeks had passed since my father moved in with us. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and life in the apartment was starting to feel normal again. My father spent his days reading the newspaper or watching TV on the couch, while Sophia went to school and I worked. It wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. For the first time in a long while, I felt I could breathe without the weight of my mother and sister on my shoulders. My father understood why I cut them off, though sometimes I caught him staring out the window with a sadness he didn't voice. I miss them, Daniel, but I know things can go on like that, he told me once over coffee. I nodded but said nothing. My anger toward my mother and Carla hadn't faded, and I didn't want him to try convincing me to forgive them. That peace wobbled one day when Sophia came home from school. I was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner, and my father was resting in his room. Sophia walked in, her backpack slung over one shoulder, with an expression I couldn't read at first. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, setting the knife down. She hesitated, looking at the floor. "Dad, Aunt Carla talked to me today when I left school," she said quietly. A chill ran through me. What do you mean she talked to you?" I asked, trying not to sound as angry as I felt. Sophia sat at the table and started talking. She was waiting for me near the exit. "She told me to tell you that she and Grandma miss you a lot, and that I miss them too. She said you should help them because we're family." Hearing that was like a knife to the chest. I couldn't believe Carla had the nerve to approach my daughter after everything she'd done. The rage I'd been holding back for weeks exploded. "Did she say anything else? Did she scare you?" I asked, clenching my fists. Sophia shook her head. "No, Dad, she just hugged me and left, but I felt weird," she replied. I hugged her tightly, trying to calm myself for her sake. "Don't worry, sweetheart, I'll handle this," I said. She nodded and went to her room, but I stayed in the kitchen, trembling with fury. That night, after Sophia and my father were asleep, I sat on the couch with my phone, scrolling through the messages Carla and my mother had sent weeks earlier. There they were. The threats to sue me, the fake pleas for forgiveness, the attempts to use my father as an excuse. And now this, harassing my daughter at school to manipulate her and get to me. It was too much. They hadn't just betrayed me. They were going after Sophia, my world, the one person who'd never hurt them. I couldn't allow it anymore. The next day, I took the morning off work and went straight to the police station. I brought printed copies of the messages and told an officer everything. My mother and sister have been harassing me since I stopped helping them financially. They threatened to sue me, showed up at my house, and now my sister talked to my 12-year-old daughter at school to manipulate her. I want a restraining order. I explained. The officer reviewed the messages and took notes. "With this and your daughter's testimony, we can file for one. Are you sure you want to proceed?" he asked. I looked at him steadily. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I replied. The process wasn't as fast as I wanted. I had to fill out forms, wait for a judge to review the case, and provide more details about what happened. I took Sophia to speak with a social worker to recount her encounter with Carla, and though I hated putting her in that position, I knew it was necessary to protect her. She was brave, as always. "I just want them to leave us alone, Dad," she told me afterward, and those words gave me more strength to keep going. 2 weeks later, I got a call saying the restraining order had been approved. My mother and Carla couldn't come near me, Sophia, or my apartment, and they were forbidden from contacting us in any way. If they did, they'd go straight to jail. When I received the papers, I felt a relief I can't explain, like a massive weight lifted off my chest. I didn't want to come to this, but they'd pushed me too far. My father, who'd been quiet through the whole process, put a hand on my shoulder that night. "You did what you had to do, son. Don't blame yourself," he said. I nodded, though part of me still felt a faint echo of guilt for his sake. Days passed, and life began to settle again. My father got used to living with us, and though he sometimes spoke of my mother and Carla with nostalgia, he never asked me to reach out to them. I think he understood they'd crossed a line that couldn't be undone. Once, he told me he'd seen them at a cafe near their old house. "They're okay, Daniel. Not happy, but okay. You don't have to worry," he said. I didn't respond. I didn't care if they were okay or not. My world was Sophia and him, and the rest could fade away. Sophia went back to being the happy kid she always was. She stopped looking out the window, afraid someone might show up, and her drawings filled with color again. One afternoon, while we did homework together, she looked at me and said, "Dad, I like that it's just us and Grandpa now." I smiled and hugged her. "Me too, sweetheart. We're okay now," I said, and I meant it. I never saw my mother or Carla again. I don't know what happened to them after the restraining order, and I don't want to know. My father saw them sometimes, I suppose in secret, but he never told me directly, and I didn't ask. He missed them, and I understood, but he also knew they couldn't come back into our lives. The house where I grew up, the car, the bills, all of it faded into the past like a bad memory. A month after the restraining order, I was at the park with Sophia and my father. She was running after a ball, laughing, while he and I sat on a bench. The sun was setting and the air was cool. "She's a good kid, Daniel. You raise her well," my father said, watching Sophia. "Thanks, Dad. I do what I can," I replied. He smiled a tired but genuine smile. "You did more than that. You saved both of us," he said. I didn't know how to respond, but I felt a peace I hadn't had in years. That night, while Sophia slept and my father watched TV, I sat on the balcony with a cup of coffee, thinking about everything. The work trip, the betrayal, the anger, the fights. I'd lost my mother and sister, but I'd gained something far greater. My daughter was safe, my father was with me, and I'd finally freed myself from a burden that had crushed me for too long. Happiness wasn't loud or perfect, but it was there, in Sophia's laughter, in my talks with my father, in the calm of knowing no one would hurt us again. And with that, I knew I'd found my peace.